All right, Shubes, I have a surprise for you.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How do I get this on? All right. There we go. There we go. I was wearing this throughout the game yesterday too.
Yeah.
I'm so happy. My homie.
That was good. I'm happy for him. It was a good I don't know if it was a good game, but he wrapped it up well.
Who were you going for?
I was going for the Chiefs. Well, it wasn't I was indifferent, but I was like, Mahomes, and I find games are more interesting when you pick a side, even if you don't care about it.
Yeah, true,
So
true.
I picked the Chiefs. So I was glad they were able to
Me
figure out the
too.
end. Yeah.
All right, why? There's one specific reason I like the Chiefs. You have to guess what it is. And don't say Taylor Swift. That's not the reason. What's the reason
Okay,
why?
that was my guess.
No.
Huh. I don't know. Wait, what? Why?
No guesses?
Is like Patrick Mahomes from Dallas or something? I don't know. Is it like a religious reason? Are
No.
they connected to us in some way?
This podcast has to be a religious reason. All right,
I'm just I'm guessing.
in the 60s, before they moved to Kansas City, the Chiefs were actually the Dallas Texans. And after the
Oh,
merger, they moved to Kansas City. That's why.
I knew it was a Dallas thing. I was like, if it's Hariji, it's either a Dallas thing or a Satwik thing or some combination of the
A
two.
Dallas Southwick thing. That's what it
Yeah.
is. So I was happy, man. That was some good
Yeah.
stuff right
It
there. Oh,
was.
no,
It was fun.
my balding hair is messed up now. All right. All right. Now to the actual work of the day.
Yes.
All right, Shubes. One challenge that we have as Bala Vihar teachers is when it comes to a school environment, the
Mm,
kids are going there on a consistent basis. So once they get into that classroom every day, they know it's time to learn.
mhm.
That culture of learning is set right away. For us here at Bala Vihar, though, it's a once a week thing where all said and done, even though a session goes an hour and a half, assembly is half an hour to 40 minutes. Once you actually get in the classroom, get settled down, at most, you have about 45 to 50 minutes of actual teaching you can do.
Yep.
In that setting, in such a short period of time, not only do you have to get your points across, that culture of learning has to be there.
Yep.
So let's talk today about how we make that. One way of doing that is to build relationships, getting to know my students on a personal level.
Mhm.
Where you see those videos of these kids going to classrooms where the teacher will have like a special handshake with each kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes viral, but what we're seeing there is they're building relationships with their kids. You know that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think that that's why, because sometimes when we teach, especially since we only see them once a week, we want to get into the content right away as much as possible, right? Which is very important. But I think there's work to be done. Firstly, in like the first couple days of the class of semester starting, there should be some stuff you're doing that's not just the curriculum to get to know the kids. Like, first day of class, like I would always do like like let's go around the room, tell me your name, tell me your some other teachers like tell me like which ISD, which I personally don't know about, but tell me what that, and then tell me a fun fact about yourself or something, right? Or what's your favorite thing, what's your favorite, whatever. I feel like if we can do a little bit more of that in the first couple days, and then as teachers remember that, and if we can get like say something like that to the kids in the middle of class, if that makes sense, right? Where so an example I'll give you. One time, I in the beginning of the year, I was like, "Oh, what's your favorite food?" One of the kids like, "I love pizza." And she was very passionate about pizza. She was like, "I like pizza is whatever, right?" I'm like, "Great, okay." So then later on, we were talking about Bhagavan Sri Krishna, right? And I was trying to express his love of butter, and I was like, oh, it's like when this student's love of pizza, but like times 100. And that just one example. Firstly, they understood the point, but she was so surprised that I remembered something from 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks ago, which usually you don't, right? It's a small example, but I think those kinds of things. And then when you're doing workshops, it should also be like a place where you get to understand what these kids are about. And when you're teaching, it's your job as a teacher to incorporate their lives, their things into the teaching. So, like
By
you said, we only get,
celebrating their successes too. Celebrate their successes.
oh, yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
when they're out there doing things, they DECA tournaments and debates and soccer and whatever. When they're out doing these things, they may miss Balviar for it too. But when you see them, you ask them about it, you have their interest, like you said,
Yeah.
Celebrate what they're doing outside as well. Give them that validation that they are accomplished in what they're doing, because our kids are for sure.
So when we talk about a culture of learning, so because the first thing I thought of was I always have a structure of how the class starts. Start with prayers, right? We do our prayers, and then my first thing was, hey, what's someone excited about that happened last week, right?
Hmm.
Just no matter what we're learning, I'm going to do that with the kids. And sometimes they don't want to talk about it. Sometimes five, six kids want to talk about some things, and like you said, they'll be like, I had a dance competition, or I did my one girl was like, oh, I did my what's it called, the Bharatanatyam thing, Angetram? No,
Arangetram.
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 Yeah, yeah,
Arangetram. Yeah.
Arangetram. So she said that
Mm.
she's like, yeah, and I actually have a friend who did that as like a college graduate or something, and I was like, wow, like you
Hmm.
did that at 12. That's amazing. You start with that because then they
Yeah.
feel good. But the more, not the more important thing, but the reason for me more so the structure is as soon as we get through that, the students, their brains shift from whatever they were doing before they got to Bala Vihar, Sunday, Saturday, party, whatever, to okay, slowly we're going into a learning mindset. So you have to have a structure of how your day goes beyond the opening prayers, if that makes sense.
Because there's already a reluctance when they walk into the classroom. As they get older in Bala Vihar, it's like, ah, I gotta be here again. That's naturally there. You see it on their faces. In the moment, they're not talking to their friends, and you have to quiet them down and say, okay, it's time to learn and talk about what we have to talk about. You see that they get a little bit of just disinterest sets in. So at that moment, using these kinds of things to really get them interested again, where we can say, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with teaching Bala Vihar, because just getting to know the kids, that matters so much. That makes our teaching that much better when they're invested and interested, because they know we're interested in them as students.
Yes.
It's not just that we have a job like any other kind of a school where we're forced to be there, they're forced to be there. They come in and we just start talking about the topic. It's we're teaching actual people, guiding them on a spiritual journey. It's got to be a bigger connection than just me seeing you once a week and then I just talk and you listen.
No, no, because you're absolutely right. Because as we have to, I have to ask if to whomever watching as teachers, are you a teacher or are you an orator? Because if you're there saying I need to get through this, because the thing that grinds my gears seriously is when I hear someone say I need to get through this material.
Yeah.
I and I remember I asked Swami Sarveshananda this one time. I was like, "What if I can't get through it?" It's like, it doesn't matter if you get through the material or not. Can you find a point and drive that point in well, and they actually benefit and learn from it? Because or else it's just going one ear coming out the other. You're talking and getting through material, but you're not able to actually connect. Right? That's the most important part. You got to connect.
Quality over quantity. And yes, I
Yes.
understand we have to get through the curriculum as much as possible, especially when it's a color curriculum that the later topics make sense.
Yes.
Like they make the previous topics make sense more because they add to them. We have to get through the syllabus. But at the same time, not at the expense of not diving into conversation and not making the kids feel like we're rushing through things and we're cutting them off and things like this.
As you become a better teacher, you will be able to get through the curriculum and without sacrificing those connections. And the what first thing I think of, Hariji, is when we did a Mahabharata for summer program um a few years ago during COVID, right? We went through the whole story. Oh, you and I worked together during that. We got through the whole story. We didn't sacrifice connections. We didn't sacrifice activities. We didn't sacrifice connecting with the kids. Mind you, we had like 500 kids in the thing, but we were still able to get the kids excited, have them involved, listening and learning, but we were still able to get through the material because we've learned how to do both. If you can only do one, it's gonna something's gonna give. As you learn to be teachers, as you progress through your journey of teaching, you'll be able to do both. In the beginning, you might have you not that you have to sacrifice the curriculum, but you have to sacrifice a little bit here and there. You're not going to be perfect. But as you learn to be a teacher, I think you don't have to sacrifice any of those things. Because I know many of our Bala Vihar teachers who are wonderful at what they do, and they're able to get through the curriculum and also connect with the kids.
So glad you brought up that camp. In the summer of 2020, during that first summer of the pandemic, we had 35 days to teach the entire Mahabharata to a group of seventh graders. And by group, I mean about 400 kids.
It's great.
So we had a group of five. Do you remember how our meetings would go? Okay, first of all, every single week we'd have two meetings
Yeah.
where we discuss what are we going to do, how are we teaching, because you have workshops, you have all these different
We
things that we did.
recorded things. Remember, we
We recorded,
recorded.
yeah,
Yeah,
modern Mahabharata where we'd
that was
like act
great.
out roles and stuff because there's nothing to do that pandemic. No one could go out, so everyone was like all in to this
Yeah.
thing. But do you remember the arguments we'd have in planning, you and me especially,
It wasn't
where you
arguments. It
it was
was constructive debates in scheduling.
because you wanted to take the war for like the last 20 days of the camp, even though there's only 35 days,
Well, that's if you read the Mahabharata, and the midpoint is the Bhagavad Gita, and then the second half,
is the war.
50,000 shlokas is the war, basically.
And my point is, we'd have to compromise. Where I wanted to take Bhagavad Gita for 3 days, and you
No,
were like,
you
"No,
wanted more than
finish
that.
it." I
You
wanted
wanted
5 days
yeah,
actually. I
you wanted
wanted five
five
days of
days,
Gita, and you wanted like one,
one and a
and
half,
1.5. Okay, and then we fought it out, and then we compromised on what 2.5 days that we got.
2 days. It was 2 days, 2 days, and
2 days.
then
2 days.
we the next part you did a little bit, and we went into the war. I'll never forget that because I thought it was great.
We were one of
Uh,
the only grade levels to actually finish the entire Mahabharata.
yeah,
We ended on that final day where all the Pandavas start dropping as they go up the mountain. They drop the bodies as they go.
yeah.
That's where we ended. So
And
I
we didn't
was really proud
compromise.
of
We
our
didn't
group.
compromise on
We didn't.
content, connection. I don't know how we did it. I think back very fondly on that camp because it was a testament to true teaching acumen, but also like planning and having. We had what is it? Workshop twice a week for the two
Yeah.
workshops a week at least.
hmm
It was work.
It was one video workshop and then one like hands-on. You made a board game about Mahabharata,
Oh,
all of this. The
that
reason
board
why this
game.
worked out is we held each other accountable. Even as the
Mm.
Brahmachari, it wasn't like I was above anyone else, where we had the Friday workshop. If it has to make sense, I have to get to that point by Thursday in the satsangs. So you guys would be like, hey, you got to hurry it up. I know you like this part, hurry it up. And then I'd have to do that and we'd get there. So that was a testament to forget just one teacher and a co-teacher. That was six of us in one
Mm.
team all working together on it.
Yeah,
And it worked because we compromised and because we listened to each other. And we created a great culture of learning for the kids.
yeah.
Even though it was an online camp, and that was the first online camp that we ever did. So we're new to it. The kids are new to it. Seventh graders aren't, calm. They're restless in class.
Yeah.
So I think that was a great experience. We really pulled it off pretty well.
And to speak of the culture of learning, if you think about Zoom teaching, and I'm sure many of our teachers have taught on Zoom because it's something we've had to do because of recent times. What's the biggest issue? I'm not going to ask you because I feel like there's a few issues, but one of the biggest issues that we have in Zoom teaching is cameras off, right? Like we over
Yeah.
and over, please turn your I think by the end of that class, we only had like of the 400 kids, we had like 20 kids who didn't have their cameras on max. Max. And
Right.
usually the number's like 50%. And we
Oh
were
yeah.
able to create that culture of like they know what's expected and they're not fighting it because they understand what's expected and now they expect that of themselves. It was that camp was incredible.
Then in your Bala Vihar classroom, what are the three biggest expectations you convey to the kids in a Bala Vihar setting?
Okay, that's good. So I might say more than three. So if from a housekeeping standpoint, you got to be seated the entire time we're there, unless like
Okay.
we're doing something where you have to stand. So don't run around. And that's more for the little kids, right? When I was teaching second grade, no phones after a certain point. So and I'll say this, I would because it was usually like it's on Sundays. I always taught on Sundays. Football season's on in the first half of the year, so I would be like, okay, we finished the opening prayers and all that. Check your phones, check your scores, and then put your phones away. No phones out, right? And then the second one is obviously like don't have side conversations, right? Which actually wasn't a huge problem for me. And if someone is having a side conversation, I ask them what they're talking about, and I say you got to say it out loud. And for some reason, they sometimes choose to actually say what they're talking about, which is funny and embarrassing. On the other side of things, it's ask as many questions as you need to. That's about the topic. Don't be scared to ask questions. We're here. We're learning together. Um, be respectful. You can ask a question if you're not sure about something in terms of religion, because one of the things I asked, sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but one of the things I asked, I remember seventh grade, first day, anyone here that who's here because their parents are making them come who doesn't identify themselves as a Hindu? It's a question I asked, and two students raised their hand at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, when I asked that question, those hands were not up. I was very happy about that. But I told those students, I was like, listen, I get it. One is be respectful of the space because I know you technically don't want to be here, but the second thing is ask me questions, but be respectful, right? Don't
Right.
just ask this. That's it. Respect and ask questions. That's for me. What about you? I heard you.
Two big rules. The first one, like you said, is respect. Where we want these kids to be open and share. And if they feel like another kid laughs at their response or their viewpoint on something, they're not going to be willing to share. And it's not just like abject disrespect where they laugh and point. I'm not talking about that. It's the eye rolling and the people dismissing them, where you look at someone when they're speaking, and if it's someone that you don't really consider to be knowledgeable or you don't take their opinion as valid, you look away or you start writing or something like that. It's those micro kind of moves that people make that really show if they're dismissing someone or actually listening to them. So disrespecting a teacher and not listening, I mean, that's par for the course. As a teacher, we got to be prepared for that. But having kids disrespect each other, that's something that's not acceptable in the classroom. And from a young age, we really got to instill that in them that you will respect each other. The other thing is really passing the ball, and this is especially for the eighth grade and above. One rule was everyone has to speak and share. Because one
Mm,
thing we do, this is about culture again in the classroom, where we have this tendency as teachers to really pander to the superstars. Because no matter
mm.
how boring we are in the class, there are those two or three superstars who, when it comes to being on stage, for example, they can sing the bhajan, they can talk about what we do in class, they can
They
do
make your job
every
easier. They make your job
they
easier
make
as teachers.
yeah. And in the classroom, they'll be attentive and answer questions. Chances are their parents taught them this topic much before even they entered Bala Vihar. So
Yeah.
all of that's there. But if we make lesson plans and we judge the culture of the environment in the class as successful based on how these kids respond, just those superstars, it's not enough. We got to pass that ball around, or else other kids get checked out and it's only two or three kids answering all our questions and we think that's great. That's not the culture we want to set. Our Balavihar culture should be one where we get everyone to jump in. And if that means some kids have weaker answers, not because they're not smart, but because they're not listening,
Yeah.
then so be it. We have to bring them up. But at the same time, we cannot just pander to our superstars. That's something we often do. That's got to change.
I love that. And I'll say that in my classes, at least in my seventh and eighth grade classes, every student knew it was fair game. I was going to call on you.
Yeah.
So if you're not paying attention, I'll never forget this. I had one kid who was just talking, like just talking. I was like, all right, you know what? From next class, every opening prayer, you're leading it. And he was, and like that class, I made him do closing prayers. And he was so, in the beginning, he actually didn't know all of them. And he was like nervous and like he needed help. But by the end of it, like he was one of the most attentive kids because they all figured out you're getting called on. If you're gonna hide in the corner, I'm not gonna let you stay in the corner, right? So yeah, I 100% agree with that. And then when it comes to the respect thing that you said, I think it's our jobs as teachers to, in a way, defend those kids that say something that might not be the right answer or something that kids snicker about or roll their eyes about. Where if something like that happens, it's your job as a teacher to be like, no, no, wait, let's hear what this person's saying, even if they're wrong. Let's say they're fully wrong. My job as a teacher is to address what they said and then walk them through the right path, but not allow the kids to laugh at them because it's wrong.
Right.
Right.
And I tell the kids a story often. This was in the youth empowerment program. I was part of the first batch. And near the end of the program, we have a capstone project that we work on. Some kind of a project that really uses the skill sets and what we've learned coming together as a batch. So we have this session in the afternoon one day, and it's about 31 of us in the batch.
Mm.
And we're all throwing around ideas for about an hour about what we can do, and nothing is sticking. Just people are checked out. The frustration of not having a good cohesive idea is people aren't happy. And so at a certain point, people were sharing in uh, the suggestions were just devolving at one point, like not
Sure.
even
As they
intelligent
do.
things that we're
As they
doing,
do.
as
Yeah.
they do, like creativity. I guess we were just emptying the tank. And then one kid raises his hand, and he was someone who was kind of different. He wasn't always on base when he spoke. He was kind of off the rails at times, a bit immature at certain times. So we dismissed him immediately when he put his hand up, me included. He has his hands up to speak, and we already start walking out of the room, literally start walking out of the room as he's trying to speak. And then one of the other people says, "Hey, he's speaking. You need to listen." One of our
Mm.
admins. So then we stop and we sit down. And the kid says, "Guys, I just realized something. There's 31 of us in our batch, and there's 31 shlokas and Bhajagovindam." And we were like, Well, okay, go on. And he says, how about we write a book or something where we each write something about that shloka and tell a story or something, and we can make a book with questions. That became our capstone product, which was Yuva Govindam from the batch one of the EP course, and that's still used by some Bala Vihar classes in teaching this text.
I
So
this is
after that experience, do not dismiss anyone. I don't care if you don't agree with them or you think they're weird or whatever it is. We do not dismiss anyone. Like that taught me so much, that one instance.
that's so I don't know why I got a little bit of goosebumps because I feel like it you're right. I've actually heard that being used in Bala Vihar teachings, and I'm just like, if you guys had dismissed that, that body of work would not exist. And it's just that's kind of wild. Wow, that's yeah. So yeah, no one should be dismissed. I love that.
It's amazing. But then one challenge comes up here. How do we try to include everyone in the class in creating that culture? If you've got a class of, in our Frisco Center, for example, we routinely have classes of more than 25 kids. You want to include every kid in the conversation or have their say. The way to do that is not to have each kid go on a monologue about stuff, but even those shorter answers and what they want to say, really spreading that wealth and having everyone share. Because when we get everyone to share, everyone's invested at that point, that really does matter. Really does matter.
Is it 25 plus even for the older grades, like past eighth grade?
Not many of the older grades, but for like the swell you see, like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, you'll
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
big
yeah.
bulge there.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, they're also like, I don't know if this is if this is like super possible, but like I've seen for for some teachers they have like a list of the kids' names, and they like keep
Yep.
track of who's been answering. So it's like, oh, like this person hasn't spoken in like a day or like in a couple weeks. Let's get them involved. That's one way of going about it. But I think I think it's goes back to what you said about not pandering to the superstars, because if you,
Yes.
as soon as you stop pandering to the superstars, other people have to step up. And the funny thing is, if you don't pander to the superstars of week one, two, and three, by week three, four, five, and six, you're gonna have new superstars, and then you stop pandering to those superstars, and then you're gonna create new ones, and then at the end of the year, everyone is a superstar in one way, shape, or form.
Make everyone a superstar. I like that. I like that.
So, Harji, we have a very extensive syllabus. Every year, teachers get extensive syllabus, and then from year to year, it seems like we're going from topic to topic or whichever they are. And I remember asking about this in the past, but can you go through the relevance of the path our kids take from kindergarten to 12th grade? And is there like a thought process as to the topics that they go from one year to the other, why they do certain topics in certain age groups? Can you walk us through the syllabus a little bit?
If I give you a long answer, will you stay awake the whole time?
I'll do my best. No, I'm kidding. Yeah,
All
of
right.
course.
Do your best. Do your best. So, starting off in kindergarten, the kids are 5 and 6 years old in kindergarten. That's when they're learning how to read at that age. So, the topic is Vedantic alphabets, where, with what they're learning in school, A for apple, B for ball, sentence formation, these letters making words, they understand even in this temple setting that they come to, they learn the same letters here, different kinds of words that help them in a different way. A for aspiration, B for brotherhood, C for cleanliness, D for daddy. Some words that are part of their everyday world, mother, father, things like that. And then deeper ones too. G for God, P for prayer, J for japa. This is their initiation into what Hindu thought is. They are exposed to what being a Hindu is for the first time, probably here, on an intellectual level. And yes, intellectual level, because they're making these kinds of connections. Then, first grade, second grade, third grade. This is the stage where our students are finally understanding that they love a good story. And so at that age of 6 to 7, 7 to 8, we go through Ramayana in first grade, Bala Bhagavatam in second grade, all the different avatars of Bhagavan Mahavishnu. You look at Bhagavan Sri Ramchandraji's story, how inspiring it is, how Bhagavan Ramji is the perfect child, perfect father, perfect husband, perfect king. That kind of perfection is something to emulate. Getting it at the age of 6 is a beautiful thing. Now the kid gets to third grade. Third graders about 8 or 9 years old. At this point, they're capable of some kind of abstract thought, where it's not just given to them spoon fed like a story, they're able to make deeper connections. So the topic is what? Bhagavan Dattatraya's 24 Gurus, where Bhagavan Dattatreya ruminates on the nature of water, how it flows so freely, or air, how air carries a scent, but it lets go of it after a while. Like that, let me let go of my baggage and all the burdens that I carry. Now, recognizing these different qualities in everyday things that they see, that requires a sense of abstract thinking. And you'd be surprised, by the age of 8 or 9, our kids are ready for that. That's why they get that topic. Then, fourth grade, the topic is symbolism in Hinduism, where I go to the temple, my parents tell me to close my eyes, fold my hands, and ask for good grades. And I look at that form of divine, where I have a normal head. This is an elephant head with a giant belly, with 4 arms, no less, and I'm told to worship. Or I'm brown skinned right here, and then the Bhagavan I pray to is this blue colored skin. What is all of this? How does this even make sense? And I'll tell you an experience. When I was a kid, I had one of my friends who was not Indian come over to play. This was around this third, fourth grade time. He saw an image, a painting that I had in my room of Hanumanji and Ramji hugging each other. And he made fun of it. He said, "What is this? You pray to someone with a monkey face? This is so dumb," is what he said. I didn't know what to say to him. I felt ashamed as well. That moment, I felt like, man, why am I Hindu? Why am I in this kind of a family? That's really how I felt. Fourth grade is that perfect time for symbolism in Hinduism, where they understand everything has a symbolic meaning. This is something to be proud of. There are deeper meanings. Also, the conditioning is when they see these forms of Bhagavan, then they understand instantly that, okay, this Modak represents this. Bhagavan Ganeshji's big ears represent this. The small eyes represent this. And they can make those connections and really imbibe those qualities as well. Fifth grade. This is where values matter so much. What are the values to follow? Because at this point is when they understand not everyone is a nice person. They understand that there's fighting, discord, they see people argue, all of this. Fifth grade with that Dharma chariot, they learn all of these different values. Sauraja, Dhiraja, all patience, having that bravery, so many different values they come across. Then sixth grade comes, where after learning all of these virtues and values, then the question arises, we learn all of these great ways to live, but if I have to point to someone that actually imbibes these values, there are very few people out there. Maybe not in my immediate orbit and family. I can't point to anyone that actually lives by these values. Sixth grade topic is Saints of India, where those saints of the remote past and the immediate past, how they've actually lived these values, where these different Santa Mahatmas can come from all over Bharatavarsha. They can be men or women. They can be from different social stratas, but that common thread in all of them is that Hindu ethos. Kids have to recognize that. Then, after learning about these saints, now they are ready for the greatest story ever told at the age of 12 and 13, where there is discord, there is fighting, there is lust, there is greed, there is backstabbing, there are story within a story, within a story, within a story, within a story. Mahabharata is where they go. And that is the best time to teach that. And they can really appreciate all of these messages, really seeing it come to life. Now, eighth grade, ages 13 and 14. This is where, for the first time in their study at CMDFW, they study the works of Pujya Gurudev Swami Chinmayananji through We Must and Know What You Have. So when you were a 14-year-old, what were your biggest pressures that you faced
Drugs and alcohol.
from friends and stuff in school?
Yeah, peer pressure, essentially,
It's
right?
there. Peer pressure, family pressure.
Yeah.
So the book we go through is Know What You Have, where the chapters are titled Family Pressure, Peer Pressure, Academic Pressure, Societal Pressure. This is what they talk about. The pressure to date, all of this is what they talk about in when they're 14 in eighth grade. There's also We Must, which is by far my favorite book, a collection of essays by Pujya Gurudev on self-development, and it is incredible how deep he goes with the simplest of words on how do we find inspiration to live for a higher ideal. That's the main crux of the book, and the way he dispatches that different layers to that whole model is incredible. He's writing straight from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, but at a level that even a middle schooler can understand. Then we get to ninth grade, the foray into high school. Around this time, when the kids are 14 and 15, is when they start objecting to the religion. You'd be surprised. I'm telling you, once the kids get to the high school level, more than 50% of our classes are atheists. Would you believe me?
I mean, I
Just
could
based on
see
what I'm
that.
seeing.
Yeah,
Based
no,
on what I'm seeing, I'd
for
say
sure.
over 50% hardcore atheists. That means they're thinking. That's all that means. So objections come up about the caste system, or what we call the caste system, ashrama system, vegetarianism, about why do we celebrate these kind of festivals. All of that is answered in ninth grade. Hindu culture is the topic. It's a beautiful textbook by Puja Guruji, and it goes through the basic fundamentals of what is the structure of scriptures, why do we celebrate the way we do. They go through all of that in ninth grade. So after studying that, 10th grade is the first time they do a deep dive into an actual grantha, a text for the first time, scriptural text, Srimad Bhagavad Gita in 10th grade. Where slogging through shloka after shloka, chapter after chapter would be too cumbersome. So Puja Guruji has a beautiful book, um, Vision of Gita, where it goes through several topics: dharma, values, the realized person, all of these topics. And for teachers, we encourage them to go through Puja Gurudev's Holy Gita, his beautiful commentary, to really get a deeper context of how to teach. Then 11th and 12th grade, this is where we give them the fundamentals of Vedanta, the Vedantic thinking, where once they get to college, they're on their own at that point. Without having this fundamental base of what is my religion saying, it's near impossible to be a practicing Hindu. So in self-unfoldment, we start at the very beginning with the question of what is happiness? And the happiness quotient that Puja Gurudev gives is just incredible, where it's happiness equals the number of desires fulfilled divided by total number of desires. So then our question is, how do we maximize that number? Then we'd say, fulfill all your desires. But it turns out minimize the denominator, total number of desires, and that number magically increases. That's the very beginning of the book. And from there, we go through energy, karma, maya, vasanas, gunas, all of these different topics until they get a amazing base that they can go through. Now, this book we take for 2 years just so we can go in depth into it. So our syllabus is unique, Shubho, here in Dallas. I know of no other center that follows this specific syllabus. When Pujaswami Sarveshananji came to Dallas in the early 2000s, he implemented the syllabus right away. And it stood the test of time. I've gone through it as a Bala Vihar kid. And at each stage, you notice what the kid needs. This syllabus provides exactly what that kid needs as they go through. Really a beautiful structure.
It really is, and I think that the thought process of addressing needs rather than what's easy to teach, because if you look at it from my perspective, as the kids get older, what we're teaching them is actually a little bit harder for us to teach to them. Like it would be easier for us to teach some of these things at a younger age, if that makes sense. But we choose to kind of address these things head on. Like it's easier to teach about peer pressure much after peer pressure has been experienced fully. Where if you teach it
Yeah.
to them as they're head on experiencing it, it's actually harder because they're stressed about their pressure. So them hearing about it from our perspective is actually harder for them to uh, submit to the learning because they're like, no, you don't understand. I have these pressures, right? So I think that's what for me was so cool. Where I was like, ooh, like maybe we should teach that at a younger age. No, no, no. Teaching them this now, or maybe we should teach this to them. I'm sorry, at an older age. No, teaching them this now is actually what helps them grow and address and face the problems they have. I love that.
And that's more challenging for a teacher, like you said. Imagine a guy's in a storm and you're telling him at that moment, hey, the storm really isn't real. You're totally fine right now.
Yeah.
That's a difficult thing to do. So props to our teachers, especially at those grade levels where the resistance is there the most, for really honing in and helping those kids out.
And I remember, and earlier you said, the approaching high school is when kids are quote unquote 50% atheist, right? I think we should um those questions that they ask should be welcomed because like you said, it means that they're thinking, right? It
Right.
means that they're actually, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing because they're not actually atheists. They're trying to make something logical, which they've grown up believing or understanding it not fully logical because they haven't had the right teaching. And it's our moment to shine at that point. Like that's when I get excited because now I can have these discussions that maybe I was holding off on, if that makes sense.
And it's one other thing we can't dismiss is for them to dismiss their religion at that middle school, high school age. It's not cool to be a Hindu or an Indian
Mm,
or to love that kind of a culture. It's not cool. Because from the academic level, I'm talking from colleges and that trickles down in the school system, you only have anti-Hindu bias in all these places,
mm,
overwhelmingly. So when they get that, when they have their friends asking certain questions based on misconceptions about Hinduism, why would they have that pride? So instilling that pride into our kids that Hinduism is the greatest religion in the world. And I don't say that as anything demeaning to any other religion, but our kids have to really believe that.
of course.
Especially growing up here in America, they need to believe this is the greatest religion in the world, no doubt about it. This is why my family follows it. This is why I have to follow it. And that speaks to people in different ways. For some people, it's the sadhana practices. For some kids, it's the great moral, ethical values that we have. For some kids, it's that intellectual pull of the philosophy. Whatever it is that really draws them to the religion, we have to make sure it has that draw for them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think and this may be off or on topic, but I think when it comes to things like peer pressure, the kids eventually realize like the cool thing is to have your belief system and not have it be connected to someone else's thought processes, right? Where if like some of your friends says, "Oh, this isn't cool," the cool thing to do is to not let that affect your thought process. Being strong and steadfast in your personal beliefs um, is actually what is seen. Like when you look at someone objectively, that's what makes them cool. Anyway, that's great. I think I do love the way our syllabus is structured, and I think if and also as we teach the kids why they're learning what they're learning, that also helps them wanting to learn the syllabus.
Definitely. All right, Shubes. The other day, I was watching a basketball game, Celtics at Miami Heat.
Mm.
On the court logo was different. It said Heat Culture. You know what Heat Culture is? Have you heard of that?
What is it?
So Miami Heat culture is a special thing that they have where coming down from their president, Pat Riley, who coached them also,
Yeah.
his whole thing is about accountability, that we hold everyone accountable for what they do. That if we have a job to do, we're not going to slip up on it because of not paying attention to details or slacking off or anything. We all hold each other accountable. And that's why even without the most talented players, they consistently win because of this kind of culture. Another example of that, San Antonio Spurs, which is a team that I have no love for at all, being a Mavs fan. But one thing they really believe in is a culture of no brilliant jerks, is what it's called. No brilliant jerks. Where if
Mm.
you look in an office setting or any collaborative space, there are certain people that mistreat others. They have an arrogant way of handling situations. They think they're above the rules, things like this. But because that person performs really well, or they have a good knowledge base or a great skill set, they kind of let that slide. If you're at a certain level of performance, you can get away with being a jerk because people say, oh, but he's performing well. That's not the culture in San Antonio Spurs basketball team where for their coach, Greg Popovich, he said, I'd rather have less talented players that work together well than having a brilliant jerk who's one of the greatest players on the team.
Mm.
So that is really telling, and they have the championships to show for it.
Yeah.
So culture is huge in any setting that we go into for success.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that reminds me of there's an author named Simon Sinek, and he talks about the Navy
Yeah.
SEALs, who are the most accomplished military organization that's out there. And they have a grid of trust versus performance. So you have people that are high trust, high performance, low trust, low performance, and that's a square, right? And they have a rule that they won't take anyone, regardless of what their performance level is, they won't take anyone of low trust. Because if you have someone who's mid performance and high trust, they will be more of an asset to the team than someone who is of high performance and low trust. If you have someone like that, they're ending up being like a narcissistic person that ends up bringing the team down because the team doesn't trust them. So I think similar to what you said, having a team that is, for the organization is a good way to put it, rather than for themselves. Building that high trust is the most important thing. Not saying you shouldn't perform, right? You have to sharpen your axe and build up to being high performer, someone who performs well, but I think trust is key in those situations.
Definitely. So that brings up the question, what should the culture be for our teacher force here at CMDFW?
Mm,
We're not a small operation where we have about maybe 50 teachers and it's easy to get us all on the same page, just meeting a few times. We've got 200 plus teachers scattered over 3 centers in 6 sessions currently.
mm,
So this is a challenge to get everyone on the same page, not because
mm,
of lack of trying on the part of the teachers, just because we're so massive. This is a
yeah.
huge machine that we have here at CMDFW. What's that one cultural ethos to have? Now, thinking about this, one of my most beautiful conversations I've ever seen, and I've seen this conversation play out several times, is when Swami Sarveshananji would speak to prospective teachers,
Mm,
people he'd approach and he'd say, "Hey, I want you to teach Bala Vihar." And
mhm.
instantly the reaction is, "No, no, I can't. I've never done this before. I've never
Yeah,
taught before. I don't know what to tell the kids. I've never
exactly.
dealt with kids. I don't know this knowledge." There's a barrage of
You're quoting me. This is
different
exactly what I
excuses.
said to him when he asked me to
I'm
teach him,
quoting
word for
myself
word. Yeah,
too.
right.
I said the same thing. And so he would ask him 2 questions, just two
Hmm.
questions. Do you believe in this knowledge? They'd say, yes, I totally do. What our Gurudev's vision is, this knowledge, I totally believe in it. The vision of our rishis, the Shastra, everything, yes, I believe in it. Do you believe the next generation should have this knowledge? They said, yes, unequivocally. Then you're qualified to teach, is what he'd say.
Mm,
So qualification to teach does not stem from I have this much knowledge, I've studied this my temperament, nothing at all. If you believe in this vision that the next generation should have this knowledge, you are ready to teach at that
mhm,
point. Because you will be forced to study, forced to improve how you teach, because that inspiration, that seed has already been there. One
mm.
part of it. Now, if we had to sum it up into what should our culture be for teachers at CMDFW, 2 phrases here. One vision, our mission.
Oof.
Every word of that matters. One vision, our mission. Why? One vision. That vision of spreading the Sanatana Dharma to that next generation, that is the very point of Bala Vihar. That was Gurudev's overarching vision here. One vision that we all subscribe to, we all buy into. That means buying into what the syllabus is. That means buying into special topics and different things we introduce for these children.
Mm,
Buy in there. Our mission. This is not looking at it as just Gurudev's mission or some leadership's mission, Hariji's mission. That's not what this is. Our mission. We all benefit from it. We all give back to it. We all have a right to shape it in the best way we can according to that one vision. So, one vision, our mission. If we have that feeling, that idea that I'm not going somewhere to teach, but this is my home I'm going to on a weekly basis to teach my own people, then we will do anything to succeed there. So
yeah.
that's a
Can we get t-shirts
cultural
made?
shift. Merch, man. Let's do
I,
hats,
I
headbands,
won't. No,
t-shirts.
that's I. When you said that, that is so. It hits the nail on the head perfectly, right? And if we can keep that in the forefront of our teaching as teachers, like in the forefront of when we are every day when we walk in to teach, I think like most of the I don't want to say issues because I don't think we have issues, but most of the things that come up will be taken care of with just that mindset.
It's a mindset that if we all adopt as teachers, we'll see what kind of impact that has on the students.
Mm,
Because this kind of a cultural shift will make sure that we don't leave any student unaccounted for. We don't get burnt out during our teaching process. And this is all things we'll go through in future episodes. But if this is the culture that we instill, there is nothing that can stop our progress and our growth.
yeah. No, it's really cool. I love it. And I think the one thing that I was so prior to you saying that, because I think your, one vision or mission covers it. My thought process going into teaching was seva. That's what I'm doing.
Right.
And I think if you go into it with that thought process, there is no perspective in which where you would be low trust because you're already doing it for something else, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
And so, but the way that you put it, one vision, our mission, it's basically a cry. It's a lack of a better word, a battle cry for seva, because you know we are adopting the greater good. We're adopting our works for the greater good. So I think I love it. I think we do need t-shirts made. I think that's something that I want, and I will not rest until we have it.
Let's do it. You fund it. You fund the endeavor. We'll get the t-shirts made for sure.
Okay, noted.